take care of every single solitary person on earth, that would not be scriptural proof that churches may build and maintain benevolent organizations and let them in turn do that. And that's exactly what his proposition says. He does not understand it, or he's trying to avoid it. One. Brother Merideth, do you want me to get somebody to read it to you like I threatened to do? Do you not know what the proposition is? Suppose I were to grant, for the sake of argument, that the church is obligated to take care of every orphan everywhere, every sinner everywhere, including all the prostitutes, drug users, everybody else. Would that be scriptural proof that churches may build and maintain benevolent organizations in order to do that? That's where your job lies. You are responsible, because you signed the proposition, to prove that the scriptures teach that churches may build and maintain benevolent organizations. He hasn't touched the issue yet. I don't believe that he knows what it is. Or if he does not want you to know it. I challenge you, Brother Merideth, every inch of you, from top to bottom, from head to toe, to deal with the problem of benevolent societies. We're not asking for Scripture for the churches, nor for the need of being cared for, but for this organization, this benevolent society between the church and the work being done. And you haven't proven it, you haven't given it, and I say that you won't, because if you could, you would. I asked Brother Merideth some questions. First, which of the following statements are true and which are false? A, the church is a missionary society. He said that was false. I said the church is not a missionary society. He wouldn't say. Is that true, Brother Merideth? You know, Brother Wood said that the church is a missionary society, and we quoted that to you tonight. Is that why you didn't mark this true or false, because you don't want to cross Brother Woods again? Is that why you did that? You don't, or do you not know? So he won't answer a simple statement. Now, Brother Merideth says that the church is not a missionary society, but he won't mark this statement true that he made the other night. But Brother Wood says that it is a missionary society, so he don't want to mark it false. You're in no man's land, aren't you, Brother Merideth? You can't say it is, you can't say it ain't. You just got to say, no, I'll just skip it. That's what he did, just skipped it. Then I said, C, the church is a missionary, is a benevolent society. He said false. Okay. Then D, the church is not a benevolent society. He didn't say anything. Well, now, why did he not say anything on this second one? Well, he knows that he said the other night that the church is not a benevolent society. But really, Brother Wood says that it is. You did mark he is false, didn't you, Brother Merideth? You believe he's wrong about that, don't you? It's just like black and white on that statement. Brother Wood said it one way, and he said it's opposite. The very opposite of that. He said the other way. Brother Wood says the church is a benevolent society. He says that's false. And then you talk about somebody else saying some things that you won't know whether or not agree with them or not. Brother Merideth, why didn't you just stay with the Scriptures to start with? You didn't need to bring up all these writings of men. That doesn't prove anything, really, does it? And then we notice it says the church is not a benevolent society. That's what he said tonight, but he won't say it tonight. That's strange, isn't it? And then I asked him about on Tuesday night, in answer to the question, may the church from its treasure give to a natural Baptist home and a natural non-religious home? You reply, the church can give to what an individual can give to. In view of this, may an individual give to a natural Baptist home and give to a non-religious home? Brother Merideth is going to take another question, isn't he? He still didn't tell us. He can't. You know, when a fellow gets in the position he's in, he can't answer some questions like that. He can't say it can give as he can't say it can't give. He'll just talk. And that's what he did. You didn't tell us, did you, Brother Merideth? You don't want us to know whether or not you think that, do you? You know why he doesn't want you to know? Because he thinks that if the individual can give, then we're going to show then by his reasoning on these other passages the church can. And if the church can give to the private Baptist homes, then if the Baptist people restore that home, when it fails, and they have an institutional home like he claims, or these benevolent societies between their churches and the home, then the churches can give to those things, and he doesn't go along with that. You do want to limit your benevolence some, don't you, Brother Merideth? He doesn't want to get those Baptists in there, does he? What about the Catholics? You don't get them in? What about the Mormons? What about Jehovah's Witnesses? What about the atheists? Oh, you'd get them in, wouldn't you? But not a Baptist. You just tell me about that. You talk about somebody being limited in their benevolence. That's not the issue. You bring that thing up. But don't you see where you're getting to, Brother Meredith? You're being tormented for your time, really. See, we signed propositions on that, but he's going. I think I figured out what I'll try next time. If I wanted to get him to discuss benevolent organizations, then I'll sign with him just to discuss the scope of benevolence. Maybe he'd get on the organizations then. Would you do that, Brother Meredith? If we were to sign to like we did, just agree to have that other one, will you discuss this or will you discuss that? That's in the proposition. You're in trouble and you know it, and you can't extricate yourself because you're in error. That's your problem. And I don't believe anybody can see that any more than you can on this point. I don't believe that you dealt with my questions fairly because I don't think you read them like you ought to have read them so people know what they were. When you said question 3 and question 4 and question 5 gave an answer, do you think anybody understood what question you was answering? They didn't have a copy of these. Did you think they had a copy, Brother Meredith? You think that's fair? Now that's all right. Now I'm going to read your questions before I answer them. You can do like you want to with mine, okay? I'm going to try to do good, return good for evil. Be fair when somebody else is unfair. That's what I want to do because that's what God expects of me as a Christian. I ask him, is it your position that the local church collective fulfills obligation to relieve the need of supplying the funds to this organization as those named in the proposition, which will then provide actual care? If not, what other things may the church provide? Please be specific. Well, he says the home is that it can provide the place necessary to personnel. Can the church provide a place, Brother Meredith? That's what you're telling us. Can it provide the personnel? Can the church do that? Can it provide the oversight of its work? Can it provide the necessaries? Or can it only provide the funds? Tell us. You have an answer. You know what he really believes? He really does not believe the church could relieve a widow. Based on his argumentation on 1 Timothy 5:16 about the individual relieving their widows, that the church might not be charged, it might relieve those who are widows indeed. You know what he says? That shows that the church can provide what the individual can provide, and he says that's a home. Okay, that sounds all right if you don't want to know the truth about it. But that verse don't say a word about a home. That needy person might not even need a home. That person may have a home and be in need. Have you ever seen a widow that needed something that already had a home, Brother Meredith? Suppose she needed to go to the doctor. She needed some hospitalization, or she needs some medical care, or she needed some groceries. She's got a home. She lives by herself. She owns her own home, but she's run out of money, run out of groceries. Or she becomes disabled. She needs somebody to clean her house. She needs somebody to bring her some groceries and then cook them. She might need her feet washed. You don't believe the church could relieve her, do you? Just send some funds to that organization you call a home and then try to get it down there to gather her up and get her out somewhere so they can hire somebody to take care of her. That's what you believe? He thinks just provide a home. He answers everything with a home, a home, a home. The Bible never says that. Not the first single solitary time in all these passages that he talks about, not a one of them ever says provide a home. He adds that. If they do, Brother Meredith, you walk up here and tell us what passage says that. Some passages talk about relieving. Some talk about visiting. You know what he thinks visit means? Send a check. He defined on one of his charts, and then but the way that he practiced it, he lets individuals, instead of going to see and inspecting and comforting and caring for in their affliction, that widow, he lets an individual put in the church treasury and then let the church send to a human organization that in turn provides some homes and apartments and all these other things, big benevolent businesses. And he calls that visiting. That's a funny way to visit. I wonder, Brother Meredith, if your mother were to call you, if she's living, and I trust that she is, and said, Noel, said, I'm down and out. I've got some problems. I'm in the straits of want. Would you come and visit me? Would you send a check over there to the Home for the Aged? Is that what you'd do? To this organization? Or would you just mail her a check? Is that what you do? That's all you're getting the church doing, yet you say the church do what the individual will do. Well, let's back it up then. That means the individual just send a check. You said all they do is provide a home. But your mother's got a home. She's living out there in a home. She's got some other problems. She needs relieving. Would you send her a home over there just to walk over and try to get her a home somewhere or another? She's got one. She needs some help, Brother Merideth. Don't you see what you've done? You have in your mind, you've been so hypnotized by your arguments about the word home that every time you see care or relieve or visit or anything along that line, it just kind of goes off, home, home, home. Isn't that about right, Brother Mary? And sometimes he means a place, sometimes he means a family relationship, and sometimes he means a benevolent society. You don't know what he means most of the time. He doesn't want you to know that he keeps trying to confuse it. And I said, does a board of directors of such organizations naming the proposition personally perform the actual care of the needy, or under their oversight? If not, just what are their functions? And he said, well, they stand in the place of the parents as guardians. Okay, so the board of directors then have oversight, don't they? But you know that's about all they do. They don't even know their kids. They don't live with them. They never meet most of them in a lot of cases. They don't know who they are. They don't know what's going on. Do they spank them, Brother Meredith? He talked about tonight, could the elders spank them? What about this board of directors? Who spanks them? Tell us about that, Brother Meredith. Do they care for them? Do they feed them and help bathe them? He said what that board does? He knows that board doesn't do any of that, but he knows that's what parents do. He knows his board aren't comparable to real parents. He has a human society, this little organization between the church and the home, and so then he has this organization here that oversees and controls and receives funds from everywhere they can get funds, and in turn they hire people to be daddies and mamas, that is, makeshifts. That's what he's got. Talk about extending God's love. You know, Brother Meredith, chart number 1 on basic argument. You know, he had several things here, and he says these are the needs of the orphans. Put it up there, please. And he showed how here certain things that the orphan needs. Did you know if I said that the orphan needs all of these things right here, that's all right. But look, get down here, he says, homes structured like Childhaven or homes, level institutions, which may meet legal requirements. A church may contribute for its treasure to a home for orphans. Now, what verse did you give on that, Brother Mary? See, if I agreed that the churches take care of every person on earth, you haven't given a single solitary verse that deals with that benevolent organization. Now, if you could show that the churches can provide for them in a private home, in a foster home, you still have this problem, this organization over here that provides these foster homes and in those foster homes and adoptive homes, and then these institutional campus care homes. That's the thing you have to. It is in harmony with what scriptures? These scriptures show about James 1:27 that you gave shows obligation to somebody, but doesn't show a thing in the world about the benevolent organizations. So you didn't take care of that at all. You know, he said Psalm 68:6, I believe. He used that several times. He said God said solitary in families. That's exactly right, and that's exactly what I contend for. I wonder, Brother Meredith, why do you want to put them under the care of an institution then? If God puts them in families, why don't you want to put them there? And then he said something about Brother Sutton objected to the Tennessee Orphan Home deinstitutionalizing, to have a family-centered care for the children. No, I didn't object to that. I think they're headed in the right direction if they don't care for them. Get away from that institutional type thing and have families for them. That shows I haven't had them for all these years. When did they start? 1909. Haven't had a family. They're going to start getting toward that family care now. Like God said, and like the Bible says, God puts us all here in families. In families. He didn't say benevolent societies, did he? That's what you're defending. I'm glad he brought that verse up. He's used it every night, and I hadn't had time to get to it. Brother Meredith, you help me out a lot because you keep emphasizing some things that gives me a chance then when I can finally get around to it to show the truth about it. And then his chart on the principle of love means helping more than brethren in Matthew 5:44 and 45, and over in Mark 7 about Jesus healing a woman, in Luke 7, in Mark 14:21. He went back to Deuteronomy 14:28 through 29. But these not on the subject, Brother Meredith. None of them talking about church obligation, and if they were, I could concede every one of them, meaning church obligation, But that would not have a thing on earth to do whether or not churches may build and maintain benevolent societies like those mentioned in the proposition.
5 minutes.
And let's notice that right quick. You can't find that chart. That's all right. But I just apply the same thing in evangelism. I don't want the chart now. Just forget it. Can churches contribute to a missionary society, Brother Merideth, to show the love for sinners that the gospel might be preached? You do think God loves sinners, don't you? You do think that if they can hear the gospel, they'll be saved. So don't you think that churches could send to a missionary organization and let it in turn preach the gospel that God's love might be shown for sinners? See, you don't have a thing on earth. You don't have a parallel. And since Jesus healed that woman, I wonder if that means a church could send donations to a hospital in order to give medical care for people today. That'd be your analogy, wouldn't it? Is that what you're trying to tell us? All right, no, he doesn't really believe that, I don't think. But maybe he does. And then, of course, he raised a question about this opponent agree with the Grouter of Bingham. Of course, that has nothing to do with the proposition at all. And then he has a chart on James 1:11, 1 Timothy 5:16. Doesn't prove a thing. We're about churches building and maintain benevolent organizations. And so it would only show that an obligation if you're writing the application, but would not show, though, that churches may do that work by sending funds to a human organization like you've got. What he labors to do is get the church obligated to care for all of these people, and then after he gets the church saddled with it, then he wants to shift it over on a human institution. You send them a check. Brother Meredith, do you know where that chart is shifting responsibility? That's right. Brother Meredith, why do you want then, first of all, to show that the church is obligated? He says, James 1:7, Galatians 6:10, others obligate the church to do all this. Well, grant for the sake of argument, Brother Meredith, that you're right about it, although you're not. Then why don't you let the church do it? You say the church can't, that a home then must do it. Home. So the home's got to do it. He says first the church is obligated, the individual is obligated, but then the home must do it. Well, you never read that in God's book, though, did you? Do you think God would charge the church doing something it couldn't do? That's what your argument is about. And so after you get the church saddled with it, then you try to shift it off over some institution you call a home, and then you try to make that parallel with this benevolent society, which the benevolent society really provides some arrangements to care for children. And then he had that chart on visit. Well, that's not on the subject, but anyway, Brother Meredith, where did you get your definition of the word visit? Or you mean it applies like in James 1:7, but that's what it means. Is that what it means over in Matthew 25:40? I mean, Matthew 25 in the day of judgment about you visited me, or you visited me not. Is that what it means over there? Same word, English and also in the Greek. Is that where you got, I mean, where did you get that definition? Is that what it means?
2 minutes.
You've assumed maybe more than you thought. Give us the authority for your definitions. The last part. Not about inspecting, going to see. Brother Meredith, don't you know what it means to visit somebody? It means send them a check. Oh, no, that's not what that means. And nobody knows that brother better than Noel Merideth. And you know, if his mother were to call him and say, Noel, I want you to visit me, and he mailed her a check, she wouldn't like it. Would she, Brother Meredith? My mother wouldn't. I said, well, Mom, she called and said, I thought you was coming. Oh, I said, I did visit you, so I sent you a check. She said, well, son, I said, come visit me. I said, well, didn't you get my check in the mail? Brother Meredith. And then Brother Meredith had his chart 16, church and individual, but that's not on the subject, Brother Meredith. He said both the church and individual, but he didn't give any proof of it. He just simply said that, and even if he could prove what he's saying about obligation, he still doesn't prove about the organization, and that's what the thing's all about. And he said, well, now, Sutton believes you. He had that chart on Sutton in taking the money out of the church treasury to fertilize a yard, but not a dime for the orphans. Well, Brother Meredith, I done handle that. You believe the same thing I do about the church. Mike could buy fertilizer, but I don't believe they could buy $10,000 worth like you got carried away the other night and said over yonder in that other session. That'd be a lot of fertilizer for a preacher's yard, wouldn't it? But it would for mine, I'll guarantee you. But anyway, we just compare the same thing to the mission society. Do you believe that it'd be a sin to take a dime out of the church treasures into a missionary organization that he might preach to the lost sinners that they might miss hell? See, that doesn't. What does that do with the proposition? Not a thing on earth. Then he said, we can see a place that is a building for the assembly in Hebrews 10:25, but many cannot see an orphan home for the care of orphans. Brother Merideth can. Thank you very kindly.